The scene begins with a line of uniformed officers standing in formation, their posture straight, their gaze forward. The air is still, marked only by the rhythm of disciplined breathing and the distant echo of boots on cement. They listen carefully to the orders being spoken before them, their expressions focused, as if every word carries weight beyond routine instruction. The images capture not a moment of ceremony, but a demonstration of preparedness, resolve, and unity inside Venezuela's security forces. Nearby, another group stands in similar formation, waiting to begin patrol. Their equipment is in place, their uniforms pressed, their shoulders squared. They do not speak. Instead, they watch the senior commander addressing them, reinforcing the message that discipline and loyalty remain non-negotiable pillars of the state's security structure. These scenes reflect an institution that presents itself as tightly organized and attentive to directives from above. Members of the armed forces positioned beside them also listen in silence. They stand in clusters, their faces composed. For them, the message is the same. The role of the armed forces is central to the identity and sovereignty of the nation. In Venezuela, the military has long been a decisive institution in political life, and these images reinforce that sense of presence and authority. As the visuals shift, law enforcement officers continue receiving instructions. Their demeanor is serious, reflecting the meaning the government attaches to internal order. The lines remain neatly arranged, suggesting coordination across forces that operate on land, at sea, and along the borders. The country's leadership often emphasizes that these forces are not just public security agents, but guardians of the political system itself. The video transitions to wide shots along the Caribbean coast. Venezuelan soldiers engage in military exercises facing the open sea. The formations spread across the coastline with waves breaking nearby. The exercises underscore a message. Venezuela maintains an active and visible defense posture, particularly in regions near maritime routes and offshore territories. The soldiers move with practiced synchronization, rifles in hand, performing maneuvers designed to signal readiness to respond to external threats. Another wide shot shows more soldiers conducting coastal drills. Their movements are measured and deliberate. The exercises are framed not as routine training, but as reinforcement of national sovereignty in areas Caracas considers strategically sensitive. An aerial view captures a Venezuelan naval vessel patrolling the Caribbean Sea. The ship cuts through open water, moving along maritime boundaries the government repeatedly emphasizes as essential to national control. Patrols such as these are used to communicate to domestic and foreign audiences that Venezuela's coastline is monitored and defended. Soldiers prepare to deploy for additional exercises. Equipment is loaded, vehicles move into position, and units coordinate their movements. The preparation is shown step by step, emphasizing operational readiness and the cohesion of units working together. Additional wide and mid shots show soldiers moving through mountainous terrain near the coast. Their uniforms blend into natural surroundings as they conduct maneuvers designed for defense in complex environments. The terrain is rugged, and their presence there conveys that the military trains not only in urban and coastal areas, but in remote landscapes where ground control can be strategically significant. The footage continues with aerial views of soldiers spread across valleys and ridgelines. Their formations stretch over the slopes, demonstrating mobility and range. Whether symbolic or practical, the message is one of territorial reach. The army conducts training in spaces that reflect the full geographic diversity of the country. Soldiers stand in formation once again, their boots aligned, their rifles lifted in front of them. They move as a single unit, a visual representation of institutional unity. The exercise concludes with a final formation, marking the end of coordinated maneuvers. Then the voice of the Defense Minister, Vladimir Padrino Lopez, becomes the focal point. He speaks with firm emphasis, delivering a message clearly intended not only for those present, but for broader audiences inside and outside Venezuela. His tone is assertive and direct. He says, "Take it, interpret it however you want to interpret it, but I will not allow a government here to kneel, to be enslaved, to be subservient to the interests of the United States. Never again slaves in Spanish." His words are delivered with measured clarity. Tómenlo, interprétenlo como lo quieran interpretar. No va a permitir aquí un gobierno arrodillado, esclavo, genuflexo de los intereses de los Estados Unidos, de más nunca esclavos. With this statement, the minister asserts not only the political role of the armed forces, but also their ideological alignment with the state leadership. The declaration rests on a central claim that any attempt to establish what he describes as a subservient government in Venezuela will be opposed. The country's political context shapes how this message is understood. For years, relations between Caracas and Washington have been marked by tension, accusations, sanctions, and competing narratives about legitimacy and governance. Venezuelan officials maintain that external attempts to influence internal political outcomes are ongoing. They assert that protecting national sovereignty requires not just political institutions, but the active involvement of the armed forces. The military has historically played a defining role in Venezuela's political system. Its leadership frequently emphasizes that the institution sees itself as a defender not only of the country's borders, but of its government structure and political model. This perspective is reinforced through public statements, televised declarations, and visible participation in state ceremonies and national events. The defense minister's statement must be understood within that framework. When he insists that a government perceived as aligned with foreign interests will not be allowed to take power, he articulates a position in which the military sees itself as a final arbiter of sovereignty. In Venezuelan political life, such declarations carry significant weight. The training exercises shown earlier in the images are part of how this narrative is reinforced. The message is that the armed forces are disciplined, organized, and positioned to respond to perceived external and internal threats. Coastal patrols emphasize territorial vigilance. Mountain operations display versatility and reach. Formation drills reflect internal order and unity. All of these elements contribute to a visual and symbolic assertion of control. Beyond the visuals, the statement also speaks to broader geopolitical alignments. Venezuela maintains political and strategic ties with a number of countries outside the United States' sphere of influence. Caracas regularly asserts that these relationships support national independence and reduce vulnerability to external pressure. The defense minister's remarks are consistent with that framing. Domestically, political debates continue regarding governance, representation, and economic conditions. Internationally, discussions persist around sanctions, diplomatic engagement, and the future of Venezuela's political landscape. But in the defense minister's view, and in the message conveyed here, one principle remains clear. The Venezuelan military considers itself an institution that will intervene to prevent what it defines as foreign domination of national politics. The officers in formation earlier in the footage are shown listening, not reacting. Their silence suggests acknowledgement of the message's seriousness. The drills along the coastline and across mountainous landscapes represent not only physical training, but the communication of an idea that sovereignty requires preparedness, and that preparedness is not merely military, but political. The minister's statement concludes with emphasis on the phrase, "never again slaves." The repetition underscores the emotional and historical framing of his message. In presenting the military as the protector of national dignity, he situates the institution at the center of Venezuela's identity and future political trajectory. As the video draws to a close, the imagery and the words combine to form a clear message. The armed forces position themselves not merely as defenders of territory, but as guarantors of the political model in place. The tone is resolute. The alignment between military leadership and government leadership is presented as unified and unwavering. In a region marked by shifting diplomatic relationships, internal pressures, and external interests, Venezuela's defense ministry signals that its stance is one of defiance and continuity. The imagery documented here reflects that message through disciplined presence and controlled demonstration of force. The words reinforce it with clarity and intention. The message, therefore, is not just a statement of policy. It is a declaration of identity and a reiteration of power, presented directly, visually, and unmistakably.